Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey, Ana Sofia, how are you today?
Hi, Mark. I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Good. I mean, I'm enjoying this beautiful spring weather here in Seattle, and the winters here are so long and dark and dreary that when it gets nice like this, I just have to be outside. How are things in Portugal now?
Sunny Portugal.
Nice. How far are you
It-
from the water?
well, I'm about 2 hours distance from the sea, so I'm in the center region, right in. So it's not quick travel, but I can't just get up in the morning and decide to go to cross the street, but it's close enough.
2 hours is not bad. I mean, imagine like in the U.S. if you live in Ohio, you can go like
Yeah,
15 hours in
that
either direction, and north, south, east, or west, and you can't hit water, you know? So yeah, 2 hours is
yeah.
awesome.
Everything is relative, right?
Exactly.
Because that's the thing. In a small country like Portugal, 2 hours seem like a long trip, but in countries like the U.S. or other larger countries, you're used to that
Yeah.
long distances that
2 hours is
are
nothing.
actually small for you,
I know
right? It's
people.
everything is
I
relative.
know people here in Seattle. They work in Seattle or Bellevue here, but they live on the other side of the Cascade Mountains over in like Cle Elum. You don't know these towns, but but they'll commute an hour and a half each way because they love to have their house in the countryside. But so like an hour and a half, it's nothing, you know. For me, it's a lot. And I lived in places like Singapore and in Tokyo and Korea where you just hop on a train and get there. But like this America, it's different, like you said.
It for me it's definitely a lot because uh, commuting is, and it's one of the factors that influence the decision for people to go freelancer or prioritize hybrid workplaces with remote work. So 2 hours for me it's a lot.
I'm with you. But isn't that one of the great things about being a freelance translator is I'm assuming you can be pretty much anywhere in the world, right? And you have that flexibility.
Yeah, yes, kind of. I understand that actually I understand that, let's say, romanticized vision of a
That's
freelancer.
my vision, man. Go ahead, tell me the reality. What's the reality?
Yeah. Well, actually, you can work from everywhere, right? In practice, so you grab your laptop. So, but you have other things to take into consideration. For example, I can take my laptop and work from anywhere, but then I have to be concerned about internet speed and the safety of connections. Because, for example, in my line of work, in medical translation, I have to take those things, and I think that it affects everything that all translators, that you have to make sure that connections are safe to transfer files, to send files, so you can actually use an open internet connection from a public space. So that's a concern. And then I actually like my large screen, right?
Fair
And
enough.
have two screens, or even three. There are people who work with three, and you can take anything like that on your backpack and just go everywhere. But it's true that you can choose to take an afternoon off or a day off and work and yeah, and do not work on that time on that day. But you have to make the decision, take into account that it may involve working more hours in the previous day or in the following day to make up for it. So it's a balance. It's flexibility,
Mhm.
but it's not total freedom.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that. And it's funny because my wife works in a bookkeeping and accounting role, and she has the two huge displays, and and I always say because she works remote most of the time, and I'm like, hey, come on, let's hop in the car and travel over there, and you can just bring your laptop. And she's like, you don't understand. It's like I can't,
Yeah,
I can't work like that. So
yeah.
that's a good point.
And once you once you start working in a large monitor or with a multiple screen setup, it's difficult to go back to your what is with what seems to be a tiny laptop monitor.
Sure. So
That's my experience.
when you work remote, do you use some type of VPN for security?
Well, honestly, I don't do a lot of remote work.
Okay.
Usually
You're
at
killing
my
my
office at
romantic
home.
view of a freelance translator.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
bringing me back to
it
reality.
helps whenever whenever I have to take the day off to go to an event or something like that. I usually arrange my schedule so I don't work. So I actually take the time off, but then I make sure that I will not be working with sensitive projects. I usually take that opportunity to do the wonderful admin work, or just replying to emails, or just doing some marketing activities. I try not to work outside my office.
Gotcha.
But yes, using VPN is a good alternative.
Okay. And just to the last point on this topic, you do have the freedom, though, to say, for example, you wanted to move to another city in Portugal, another city in Europe, and establish yourself there, or maybe spend 6 months a year. But you do need sort of a home base, right? And so you do have that option, or do you feel that you need to be in Portugal, for example, to do your work?
In professionally wise, in terms of my work, no, I actually don't have to be in Portugal. And it's so because I work in Portugal and most of my clients are in other countries. So it's so that I don't have to work in a particular country or a particular region personally, professionally. The personal life is another aspect. So we, because you can't dissociate those two domains in your life, so you have to take into consideration what is best for your particular circumstances. But yes, you are correct. It's true that we are not bound to be in a specific region or country, or even within in a given country. For example, we don't have to be located in huge cities, or so we can go to quieter regions in a country. So you can actually work from everywhere.
Yeah.
I hope that it helps you keep your romanticized vision.
Yes,
Sorry, I'm
it's
trying.
rekindling the romance. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Thank you. So how did you get started in medical translation? Because that's what we're going to talk mostly about today is
Mhm.
medical translation and medical writing. But how did you get your start?
Well, honestly, I always knew that I wanted to do something around communication, not particularly a translation, but that appeared as soon as I started my higher education. So translation was always, because it relates with the communication field. So that I always wanted to be a translator. But the medical translation appeared probably because of my own path as someone living with a chronic illness. So that probably, if we analyze all my I don't know, subconscious decisions, that's probably the main factor that affected my choice for medical translation. And then there's the professional part of it. So I worked as when I finished my translation studies, I worked as a translation assistant for a freelance translator who specializes in medical translation and life sciences. And then I ended up working also in-house at a social study center, and then at the nursing school. So it has those personal and professional factors that came into play into my decision.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And a lot of times people talk about financial translation or medical translation, and they use that as a blanket term, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm a medical translator." But and I know that underneath that term medical translation, there are many different types of translation and
Yeah.
projects and workflows. Can you touch on the ones that you see, not even that you have to be, that you personally do, but the ones that you see most common in the market, the different types?
Well, I think that, like you mentioned, medical translation is kind of an umbrella term,
Hmm.
right? Honestly, I think that it should be called life sciences
Okay.
translation because it would be more uh,
Bigger umbrella.
a bigger umbrella. Yes, thank you. But within medical translation, I think that the most I won't say important, but like you said, common fields are just is pharmaceutical translation in terms of the development
Hmm.
of medicinal products, of drug development, and then it is clinical trials, clinical research,
Hmm.
um, medical devices is also a field, specific field within medical translation, and finally scientific translation, which is the translation of scientific papers, for example, journal articles. Um,
Out of all, go ahead.
yeah, no, and I was saying that even within those uh, uh, mini umbrellas, there are there are other fields that relate to other fields of translation. For example, you have marketing text that can come across in all these fields, which also play with legal translation, for example, for clinical research contracts, for example. So it is a very broad field to work on.
So for somebody, I want to ask you what your favorite is, but before I do that, I want to ask, for somebody who's looking at medical translation or life sciences translation, and they need to kind of pick. They probably should pick a subcategory first, because you can't specialize in everything all at once. What you know, what do you think would be the best, I guess, subcategories to get started in? The lowest barriers.
Well, I think it depends on on each person's skills, because so I'll try to explain this. Because if you go to, for example, clinical trial translations or pharmaceutical translations, it may be easier, even if it sounds complex. It may be easier to start with those fields because there are a lot of reference and resources to learn, to use as templates. There is a lot of material in those fields. But for example, if you have already worked with some marketing material, you may consider starting the with some wellness 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 and healthcare material, yeah, because there are consumer aimed uh, materials. So it will depend on your skills and on your interest. But I would say that would be something. I would say that for me, for example, scientific translation maybe sometimes harder because you have to be aware of, for example, publication guidelines, and usually they refer to studies and innovative products that you have a lot of new language, and authors have their own specific style to write. So it really depends on what you are looking for.
Okay. And do you have a personal favorite category or subcategory?
Yeah, I'm all about clinical trials. So everything that is clinical research, I enjoy doing that because uh, I actually one of the things that I love about my job is not like the the flexibility, and we were talking about, but it's actually and the the sense that I'm doing something to improve people's lives, to improve patients and caregivers. So everything that is that relates to clinical trials, and even like I said, within clinical trials, what I really like to work on is everything that is aimed at patients.
So, um, I really like that as well. I mean, it feels good if you're doing something that helps the world a better place and you're helping people to get better somehow. Um, when you are translating in clinical trials or translating clinical trials content, I what are some of the more important aspects of doing that job?
Well, I think that, uh, and I think it's okay. It's applicable to every translation field, but I think it's accuracy and quality and accuracy. And with accuracy, I mean that you have to make sure that you know what you are doing. You know what are you translating about. You have to really understand the subject matter, but then you and also have to make sure that it's accurately appropriate to it's appropriate to the target audience. Like I said, in clinical trials, you can be translating for a material that is aimed at the regulatory agencies, healthcare professionals, patients, the public in general. So, and you really need to keep in mind that each one of these audiences have have their own literacy levels and expectations regarding the terminology and language use that you use. So that's one of that that's the main concern when dealing with clinical trials translation is scientific accuracy and appropriateness to the target audience.
So yeah, and readability is huge, and I think in the EU, for example, there are some like regulations that guide you towards readability, especially when you're talking about content that's targeting consumers or clinical trial participants. How do you know, and how do you figure out what's the right, you know, readability level, and I mean, obviously you kind of know the audience, but is there some kind of tool you use, or is there some type of metric, or do you just have a sense?
Well, I think usually I have a sense of what is the literacy level, because one thing that is important and translators usually have is a knowledge of their own population. So I have a general knowledge. I have a knowledge of the general literacy level of the Portuguese audience, right?
Hmm.
So I know, as a translator, you know that uh, this certain audience will or will not understand certain types of language that you use, but there are literacy levels, the literacy tools, literacy assessment tools. The problem is that, for example, they they I don't sometimes I feel that they don't take into consideration every factor taking because one thing that literacy and plain language principles say is that you need to aim at using shorter sentences, and they even provide a limit of numbers that is recommended to use.
Hmm.
But sometimes when you're translating or writing to patients, you need to actually expand sentences, because making sure that you're using a plain language to explain something, it doesn't mean that you have to use uh, small words or short sentences. Sometimes you need to explain meaning. So in those tools take you to only to a point, and then you have to be really up to date with everything that is happening literacy wise. in the target center you're working on.
Yeah, so it's definitely an acquired skill, and sounds like a part art too, and it comes with experience.
Yeah, you know that I talked with several people about this, and actually the people say colleagues have said to me that it's sometimes it's harder to translate and write for patients than for healthcare professionals or scientists or regulatory agencies, because it's it's more difficult to keep it just plain and simple. We have a tendency um, to use a lot of words and to use a lot of fancy words to say something. And for an audience composed of healthcare professionals or reviewers from agencies, that may work. But when you are working in tech on tech aimed at clients, patients, caregivers, and lay people, you really need to make an effort to keep it clear but simple.
Excellent. It's, you've worked both as an in-house and as a freelancer. Are there any advantages to working in one environment versus the other?
Well, yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages in both of them. I get asked that
Mhm.
question a lot. Well, we already talked about one of the advantages, right? Even if it's the flexibility
Mm.
and the flexibility of working how uh, a lot or not working at all in one day, for example, as you see fit, and but also the flexibility of when you reach a certain point to pick to be able
Right.
to pick the projects you want to get involved in. Um, but in-house working in-house also has its advantages. You know, it has some kind. There's security in it, right? There's a safety in knowing that you have a fixed schedule, a fixed income at the end of the month. So, uh, and depending on what the place you work, you you may find it interesting. For example, I enjoyed working in all the places I worked in house. So, but there were working in house. You have to work on everything that lands on your desk, right? So it you start your day, you work on what's on your desk, and then you go home, and then you go back to the office, and there's another pile at your desk. So and you can't say no to that because it's your employer that is giving that test to you. As a freelancer, you can pick that.
Right.
You can say no to clients, negotiate deadlines. Sometimes it's easier to negotiate deadlines as a freelancer than as an in-house translator or any other type of work. So it has benefits and disadvantages.
Yeah, one of the benefits that I've seen, and this was in the financial services space, where we had a pretty strong in-house team, is you could bring in a new college graduate that didn't really have much industry experience, and because they're part of a team and they're sharing information and they can be mentored, they could rapidly skill up and learn that specific domain. So, for example, these translators were working in equity research. Maybe they didn't have that super strong financial background, but being part of a team and having kind of leaders there that could mentor them really accelerated their growth. And sometimes as a freelancer, just to get that volume of work at the beginning can be challenging, especially if it's very specialized work. So that might be an advantage as well.
No, you're right. For someone that is starting, I think that working in house for a given period of time, I think it's very valuable experience because when you start out as a freelancer, it's really unfortunately it's very hard to get the the appropriate number of clients and projects to meet your income goal at the end of the month, right? So it's really hard to get in the market as a freelancer. And I agree with you that working first, spending some time working in house, like either if it's an internship or um, actually a position at a company is really valuable. And I think that when translators graduate, I think they have to balance what they want, because imagine you can do work in-house, start by working in-house at a translation agency,
Mm-hmm.
and then you gain knowledge about the industry, because newcomers usually don't have that type of knowledge, how things work in terms of the business side of translation. But for example, you may want to prioritize the industry knowledge and seek opportunities within other companies, what we call our end clients. So imagine that I was to enter the profession now, and I knew that I wanted to specialize in medical translation. Uh, I would probably prefer to look for a job opportunity at a pharmaceutical company or a health medical communication agency, because they will you gain industry knowledge,
Sure.
right? So you have to balance your priorities.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, I know that actually I want to come back and talk about how you build your business as a freelancer in a second, but I know that you also work as not just a medical translator, but as a medical writer. Explain to me the difference in the skills required to do that.
Well, I think that the skills, some of the skills are similar. I'm I chose to add medical writing to my service portfolio in 2020, um, because like you mentioned, the skills are there. So you have the research, you have to have research skills, project management skills, knowledge of health, and in my case, from the pharmaceutical field. So you have the knowledge. So the skills are uh, similar. What the only difference between writing and translating, I think, is that when you are translating, you have to you need to make it to be aware that okay, you're translating, but you are not the author of the text, right? You may not disagree, but oh, I would write this differently. But you cannot do that because you're not the author. At best, you can advise your client, which I do constantly, advise your client to say, hey, you have you thought about rewording this segment, for example, this section? Uh, as a writer, you get the chance of actually going, um moving upstream the process, so you get more, you are more actively engaged in the process, but the skills are similar.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Everything in life's a trade-off, and I can see that working as a translator, one of the positives is the pressure of creating the content is not there. My job is just to get it from the source into the target language in the appropriate manner.
Hmm.
But I don't have that. At the same time, I don't have that kind of. I'm not satisfying maybe perhaps that complete creativeness or creative urges, right? But when you are the writer, it's like you get to create something from ground zero. But that also comes with some pressure. Having done a fair amount of writing myself, it's like sometimes if I just can't get things going, it's like just I wish somebody could just tell me what it was and then I could translate it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That is all right. But just a small
Aside.
addition is that actually you are writing, but you have a client, so and you have to write according to their project brief.
Right.
So and but that's when I think that one of the things I like about it is because you build a relationship with your client. You you get the project brief, you get for example, I have these references, something based on what I do. I get references and scientific text, for example, and my client asks me to, I need to make an infographic out of this for aimed at patients. So you create you write the first draft, and then you send it to your client, and the client recommends changes, and you implement it, and you discuss them with the client. Of course, as translators, we also deal with client feedback, but since our clients do not understand, for example, our target language, the feedback goes so far. In this, that there is a greater sense of co-creation with your clients. Okay, you have project guidelines, you have a project brief, but there is a greater sense of collaboration and co-creation. So
Yeah. So there's pros
you're
and
not
cons to both
writing
sides.
alone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
you're not writing alone.
yeah. Le- Um, in addition to translating and writing, you also do mentoring. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. Why did you start it, and what does it include, and what have been some of your experiences?
Well, I'm just finishing the first edition of the medical translation mentoring, and the reason I created is that I wish I had someone to guide me when I was entering the business, or when I decided to go a full-time freelancer, or when I decided to add medical writing to my portfolio. So it's not specific to starting a career. You I you benefit for mentoring throughout all the stages of your career, right? So, but besides some isolated and individual initiatives, I felt the need to create a community around medical translation. So, and I've also been doing mentoring for translators through the Portuguese Association, um, but it's for it's for it, it isn't something just focused on medical translation. So that's why I created this translation mentoring, the medical translation mentoring program, and it it has 8 weeks, and it's a group mentoring program, which is really great. Like I said, I'm finishing the first edition now, and I have to say that I'm really happy about with the sense of community that we created, because my opinion is that I'm I'm a discussion facilitator. I'm not there to tell anyone what they should do, because it's not a training program. But try to facilitate, really encourage participants to discuss and to deal how to deal with some obstacles that they find. So um, and we talk about, for example, building CV, addressing clients, building quotes, online presence, which was a really interesting um, week, because now it ended up being focusing on LinkedIn, which is the go-to social media, right? So it has been really interesting experience for me, and for, hopefully for participants. And I know that they are actually enjoying. They agree with me with the sense of community that we are building.
I 100% agree with you on the importance of like collaborative learning. I've done a
Yeah.
fair amount of sales training, both with a mixed group of professionals or in-house with in-house teams. And what I always say is like, look, nobody can come in here, no one person can come in here and tell you how to do everything, and no one book or course. People always say, hey, what book should I read? And there's no one answer there, but one thing that I can say is that if you can get people to share best practices, challenges, success stories, then the learning goes up exponentially. And when the most successful sales teams that I've seen are ones that they come back immediately and say, hey, I had this challenge or this objection. How do you guys respond to that? And boom, that you get 5 good answers, right? And it's just that constantly sharing. What's the competition doing? What's the market looking like? And it's really important.
Yeah, and I think it is important because what is important is also I could say what I do, and I could say, here's what I did, here's is what how I achieved success. Like I don't like using that expression. This is how successful I am, and you need to do exactly the same as I did in order to be a successful translator. No, because each one of us has their own reality, their own circumstances, their own context that shapes all of this.
Exactly.
So the fact that I did everything in a certain way doesn't mean that everyone has to do the exact same way. So that's why it is a mentoring program, because I'm there to guide the discussion, and just when prompted, I will tell you, I will give advice. But the thing is exactly it's through the discussion, and so it's a group mentoring, but it's case by case. So we're not there to follow just a roadmap with a fixed timeline and a fixed checklist. So each one of us has their own builds their own roadmap based on the topic of the mentoring.
That's awesome. Um, you mentioned LinkedIn.
Yeah.
What are some of the, because it's funny because every social media, and different tools are constantly evolving. It used to be pick up the phone and call people. Now nobody's answering their phone. It used to be send people emails. Now it's going to spam, or they're just like, hey, leave me alone. Some people will respond. And then it was like LinkedIn. And then now people on LinkedIn are even like putting up walls and things around them. Um, from the point of view of a freelance translator, especially in the life sciences space, what are some things that are working for you or for some of these other people that you talk with on LinkedIn?
Well, I think it's similar to, I think that for every freelance professional, regardless of their area, it's that LinkedIn is the go-to to industry to industry companies, right? And like you said before, it was pick up the phone. Then it was probably the yellow pages.
Yeah.
Then it was the internet. You type the search and the search and the. But with with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn started as a place where you would go to find an employment position, right? But then it changed, and it's the place where you go to find both employment positions and freelance opportunities. So what's working at the moment right now is having a clear profile, a clearly defined profile with all the fields filled in, and there are a lot of people giving good advice, and not particularly translation that is not specific to translation, but there are good, excellent advice on LinkedIn about how to build your profile on LinkedIn, and then just share content. And it's one of the biggest hurdles for everyone. It's like you mentioned, what to write, right? So just write about what you do. So, and then it's really connecting with people. And I think that most people are reluctant to connect with people, because translators are not although it is changing, we are changing. We are very closed on our translation bubble, and it's hard to reach out to people in other industries
Sure.
with our clients. But I think it's important to really make connections, just to send a quick message asking to connect, and then go from there. And imagine LinkedIn as being an in-person event.
Mm-hmm.
So during coffee break, you find someone, you say hi, and you then engage in a conversation. You don't go straight to that person and say, "Hey, here's my business card. I'm a, do you have work for me?" So you have to build a relationships on LinkedIn.
I think that's some amazing advice. One, get your profile right. To contribute, and treat it as a conversation. That's some great advice right there. Um, by the way, I've spent some time on your website and on your blog, and I've found it to be very, very impressive, both in terms of the content you present it and how you present it. Also, you list all the different associations that you're a member of, or that you've participated at or presented at. Can you talk a little bit about, for the domain of life sciences translation or medical writing, what are the go-to associations or events that you would recommend people to participate in?
Well, regarding the associations, I always tell people that they should be part of a translation association in their target language and one in their source language. For example, if you work English into Portuguese, for example, I'm a member of it's the Portuguese speaking the Association of Portuguese Speaking Translators, but also a member of, for example, ATA. Uh, so it's one of each. Regarding specific medical translation, I really enjoy being part of Premedica,
Mm-hmm.
which is an association for medical editors
Okay.
and translators. It's they mostly discuss everything in Spanish, so it has that particular aspect, but it is open to every language, and the America is multilingual.
Mm-hmm.
And then for writing, if you operate in Europe, the European Medical Writers Association is the go-to place, and in the U.S. it's the American Medical Writers Association.
Awesome.
Like I said, I could give more advice on associations, but it really depends again in the personal circumstances. In the particular cases, uh, associations, it really depends on where you're located, what is your language combination. But also, what I would recommend is to look for industry-based associations.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that I'm a member of a few industry-based associations, like ISPOR, DIA, and ISOFOL. So because they deal with the topics that I work with, but it's not translation related.
Again, I think that's
So
some.
it is important, and the same applies to events, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just keep it. I would recommend that you keep it balanced between attending translation events and industry specific your clients events. I think it's really important to be where your clients are. No, not only to learn how your clients speak, what your clients are doing in general, how the innovations, and in medical translation it's really important to keep up to date with everything that is going on. For example, in clinical research, there are always new products being developed, new designs, new designs for trials. For example, it's really important to be aware of everything that is being discussed, and you also get the chance to network during those events.
Hmm.
Uh, it may be you may feel a bit overwhelming at the beginning. I remember when I first started to attend those kinds of events, you would find me at a corner just with sipping my coffee and just trying not to speak with anyone. um, it, I'm getting better, so it's a process.
I can't imagine
So
you having trouble talking with somebody. I mean, it's just so easy to it's
oh
just so easy
yeah.
to talk with you. So
Yeah, that's because you're on the other side of the world.
right.
So it's different on camera, right?
Yeah.
And it's different. It is different for someone who is actually um, kind of. I may seem I'm an introvert, so it's difficult for me to start engaging with people. Once I start, it's different, but it's really hard to start. So, but yeah, you would find me at a corner in an event. Um, but we and you also asked about the conferences. Um, for medical writing, you have the European Medical Writers Association conference that they organize two, and then for translation, I really enjoyed the MET meetings. I don't know if it's the Mediterranean Editors and Translators conference. I really enjoyed it's they are small conferences, so it's easier to once you become comfortable to actually talk with people.
Sure.
So I really enjoyed the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, there is no conference specifically for medical translation. If there was a conference on medical translation, I would just jump on a plane and be there. um, so, but but I think that those are my two favorite conferences at the moment.
Awesome. Well, I think that's some great advice and some great observations. Let me ask you just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
What are some future trends in medical or life sciences translation that you see happening? Could be regards
Well,
to technology, could be regards to
mm,
types of translation, or it could be demand levels.
well, I think that the demand language lab in terms of demand, I think that medical translation will see a rise in the demand because there are a lot of new with the new regulations coming in, and we had two of those one for medical devices and one for clinical trials that are still in being already implemented or in the transition period. And with those regulations bring a more translation requirement. There are more materials being asked regulations to be translated. So I think that we'll see a demand in quantity. And then you mentioned technology, and of course, with I think that there will be in some years to come. I don't think we're there yet. It will also be impacted by artificial intelligence, even more so than it's being now. But I think that it will actually help the demand, contribute to increase the demand for translators because since there is a lot of content being produced, thanks to those technologies, that content will need to be translated. So, and whether we are working on those texts as translators or as post editors, I think we'll continue to see an increasing demand in medical translation. That, or I'm being excessively positive,
That
but
that's I
I do think that
sounds good.
we yeah I think that people are very uh, concerned with artificial intelligence, but we've been having this discussion for the past, what, 20, 30 years
Yeah.
around. It's there now, okay. The engines are there now, so but that may be a good thing. Like I said, the increase of the increasing use of artificial intelligence in the creation of in the developing of content, in development of content, may bring more content to be translated to every language, because that's another concern, specifically around clinical research, is that there is an increasing concern about engaging people regardless of their native language or cultural background. There are several initiatives for diversity and inclusion, and that includes the bringing in people from different countries that speak different languages, and we translators make that happen. So I feel positive about the medical translation industry because of that.
That's awesome. So it's good to end on a positive note. The glass is half full, and the future looks bright. So, hey,
Right. Yeah.
Ana Sofia, I've really enjoyed this conversation, as I've enjoyed our previous conversations. If any of our listeners or viewers would like to get in touch with you, what's the preferred way? Is it through your website, LinkedIn, or?
Well, I'm relatively easy to find, so everyone can find me on LinkedIn. My or on my website, it's my name. It's easy to find. It's anasofia.com. So either way, it's really easy to find me and contact me.
Yeah, and I recommend any of our listeners or viewers that are interested in this subject, just go to Ana Sofia's website. There's so much information there in terms of different associations, her mentoring class, and also your blog. I mean, when I'm looking for inspiration on things to write about in the domain of life sciences, I just have to go to your blog, and I'm like, oh, there's some ideas. I'll steal those.
Thank you. The blog is it's really dear initiative to me, because I write it with a colleague, Ana Catarina Lopes. We write about medical and marketing translation. So it's like you mentioned. Sometimes it's difficult to get the wheels starting to turning, right? But we do our best to keep it interesting.
No, it's a great blog. Hey, Ana Sofia, thanks again so much for being on memoQ Talks, and I look forward to crossing paths with you in person, hopefully sometime in the near future.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. You too. Have a lovely day.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.